Good evening. Good evening to you, ladies and gentlemen. WeatherBrains episode number 787. Better late than never. We were scheduled to be on Monday night, as typically is the case. However, this week we are on Tuesday night, the 16th of February. Tuesday night special this is. And that we've had a few little weather issues for our folks on the panel, including me and many others. It's been a very interesting week in weather. So anyway, we're here, Tuesday night special, early. We're doing this at 7 o'clock Central. We know most of you watch later, you listen. The time really is not that important. But there are some of you weenies that do like to watch this live. So welcome. So let me get the embed code going here and get the guests on really quick because I'm running a little late myself. All right, embed code is good to go. Now let's get our guests on the show here. And then we'll be rocking and rolling. Yeah, with these high impact weather events, times have really changed. It used to be we worried about television, and that was it. That was so long ago and so far away. And now with all the digital platforms and the social media stuff, it is just nonstop for days and days leading up to the event. And by the time you get to the event, I mean, you're just a pile of mush a lot of times. And that would be a good show title for this week, Pile of Mush. But we can't take the show title from the pre-show. And by the way, this is the pre-show. If you're new to this, if you want to watch the real show, move it over about 5 minutes. This is where we share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and we say outrageous things sometimes. So we are going to see if we can get everybody on the show and get this thing underway. I know that Troy is out. I think Nate is out. I think I don't know. We'll find out who's out. The weather is creating havoc on the show here. A weather show where weather creates havoc. That's the way that it should be. But obviously, most of you know that it's been snow and ice for most of us on the panel here, the regulars. And we have had quite an interesting ride. And we'll talk about it once we get into the show here. But yeah, I feel, I don't know, you want to be at the top of your game during a big high impact weather event. I mean, you want to be at the top mentally, you want to be sharp, you want to be rested, you want to be ready to get in there and go. And now with the digital stuff and the social stuff, I'm telling you, you were just drop dead exhausted by the time the event begins, which is not good. Not good at all. But it is what it is, and you have to learn to do it. That's the one thing, I tell the younger folks, you got to learn to live without sleep and just to keep on keeping on in the midst of all this. And then after the event, it doesn't stop. Again, for years when the event was over, you kind of handed it over to the news people and you let them take it. Well, now, for example, where I am, I probably have 8,000, that's not an exaggeration, 8,000 unread messages. And these are remarkable images and video and really important stuff, what some people tell you, well, just blow it off. Well, you can't do that. This is important stuff. And so at some point, I've got to go through 8,000 direct messages. And that's just on the social platforms, not counting the email. And it is just, you are so overwhelmed. At some point, you just want to throw your hands up and say, I give. But you got to keep on keeping on, which is what we do here on this shoe. Bill Murray is here, brought to you by Peloton, the exercise bike of choice.
Well, you're only brought to you by the seat of Peloton, because that's all you can see, really.
Yeah, you've blocked it. They apparently didn't pay for this month or
something. Their fee was so small that they could only pay for the seat.
Yeah, I understand. Kathy, can you hear us okay?
I can. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear. Thanks for
coming on the show. This has been the most convoluted path to a start time in the history of the show.
Yeah,
15 years. I still don't know if anybody's going to show up because of all the timing notices and changes.
What's cool, I see Rick Smith on the show here. This is great.
Yeah, Rick is joining us.
My heart is warm now. My heart was
about that.
I saw Rick come online. Wow.
It was cold outside. I needed a place to go. So,
well, it's always warm here in the WeatherBrains.
Always warm in the WeatherBrains pre-show warm-up area. So we know that Troy is out because he has no power.
Yeah, well, he's running the state of Texas right now.
But he doesn't.
Apparently not much fun running the state of Texas right now.
But he has no power, right? I mean, he didn't have.
Well, he's at his sister's house, I think, who does have power. I think they moved him over there because of his emergency management duties. I think is what I heard, James. So
okay,
we got to have Troy on. Just have a show on Troy sometime. You know, we need to do that. He's a big deal.
We should. I mean, I think we just ought to pick we could do a whole show on Rick. I mean,
I know. I'm so glad he joined us. I think he's going to be the only other panelist tonight.
So we know that Aubrey is out because she's got weather issues. Nate is out. Kim, I've not heard from Kim. Hopefully, I don't know if Kim knows about the early start time. We changed the show start time.
I texted her and let her know, but I fear that we ran into the gears of.
Right, she has child duties. Yeah, right. She has child duties, so that's okay. We've got some.
We need her because she's smart enough to talk to Kathy.
She is.
I hope Chris can join us, but he may be coming in at 8.
Okay, well, let's get this thing started here.
This will be one of those come as you can.
Yeah, just and for those people that are watching before we start the audio recorders here, I don't know what's up with the YouTube chat. I have no idea. I mean, every week the YouTube live chat feature that they use extensively has just not been working. And I noticed it says something has gone wrong, and it's got that weird. I don't know. I mean, I wish I could wave a magic wand and fix it, but last week it started working in the middle of the show. So maybe the same thing will happen this time. So sorry, but that one is beyond my control. So okay, here we go. I know I haven't done something, but I'll figure out what I have not done when it doesn't happen. So here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. WeatherBrains, episode number 787. It's the weekly show all about weather. This is for Tuesday, the 16th of February. We are live from the frozen tundra of the continental United States. Ooh, boy, it's been a rough ride. In fact, we're doing the show a day late for those that like to watch it live. We're doing this on Tuesday. A lot of people, Monday morning, Tuesday morning, they're used to getting the audio podcast, but it just wasn't there. Well, we're doing it a day late because we had some weather issues, and we still have some weather issues, but by golly, we're going to make this one fly, Bill Murray. It has been a challenging series of weather events for much of the United States. Watching these watch warning maps and the number of winter storm watches and warnings has been just absolutely remarkable. Where we are down here in the deep south, we had some pretty good snow today. It was kind of in the words of J.B. Elliott, the great J.B. Elliott, illegal snow. For those that happen to be watching, we know most of you listen. This is what it looked like at my house this morning. At a moment where the sky was to be partly sunny and we were to have no precipitation. This went on for hours, and it was just gorgeous. I mean, it was absolutely gorgeous. And and it really didn't create any additional problems. The problems were related to an ice storm that was in the northwestern part of the state. But I would say that was more of a fun type thing. And I'm going through all of these videos, and goodness, it takes a long time to do this, but there's just some absolute jewels in here of these kids having fun. To me, that's the best part of this whole thing, is watching the kids light up, and they're getting out there and they're sledding around on, crazy things. I mean, it's just been absolutely fun watching this. I mean, here, for those that are watching, here's some bonehead. I don't even know what this thing is behind this truck. And I mean, this guy wipes out. I mean, that is a traumatic brain injury waiting to happen.
Yeah.
But anyway,
that's an emergency room visit there, right there.
Yeah. And then of course you got these knuckleheads that go out there, with no shirt on and all this kind of stuff. But it's just, It is an absolute blast getting to see the kids' reaction. And I'm so busy, I honestly can't get out there and have fun. If it was up to me, I would be doing this kind of stuff. But I do know that a lot of people are suffering, across the country. Bill Murray, it's been a rough ride. But bring in our special guests and our regular panelist who's back.
First tonight, we were running
astray.
short on panelists, and we needed some word on how the storm has impacted the Southern Plains. So we invited Rick Smith to come back, and I never thought he'd say yes, but I was so pleased he did. So Rick, of course, is a warning coordination meteorologist at the National Weather Service in Norman, and we miss you a lot, Rick. It's good to have you back tonight.
Well, the office is the warmest room in my house, so this gave me an excuse to sit in here for a couple hours. So, I'm glad to be back. It's awesome, and yeah, the weather has just been crazy the last, I don't know, year maybe, but the last week has just been wild with all the winter weather and just unprecedented. You hear that term a lot, unprecedented, historic, that kind of thing. It really has been that, not just here, but in many places. So yeah, you probably can't see out the window there, but it's snowing here right now again. So we're working on our second round of snow here in about 2 or 3 days.
Yeah, my radar data is old here, and wow, yeah, a lot, big shield of precipitation over much of Oklahoma right now. How much snow are you expecting tonight across
I think we've got for here like 4 to 6 inches for the metro here. May have a little bit more up north, a little bit more down south. This is supposed to go on until Wednesday morning sometime. So, and lots of the area has anywhere from 4 to 6 inches still sitting here from Sunday. So it's very, very unusual for us I had to give instructions to somebody today on a webinar. They asked, how do you measure snow on top of snow? And I was like, I don't think I've ever done that or thought about how to do it. So I made something up and it turned out to be right. But yeah, we're not used to doing that. Getting 4 to 6 inches on top of 4 to 6 inches is kind of crazy for even here.
So how do you do it? Right? This is the kind of expertise we need to know here on WeatherBrains.
Well, there's a couple of different ways. One of the ways is you can go out and measure the snow that you have currently right before it starts snowing, and then just remember that and subtract it from your other amounts. A better way might be to have a snowboard, where you put a snowboard out on a flat surface out in the open where it's not subject to drifting or anything. Get that board down flush with the level of the snow that's already there, and just use that to start your new measurements. That's probably the preferred method, I think.
Well, hang on just a second, because we want to talk about impacts again for a minute, but let me bring in our guest weather brain tonight. We do have another guest weather brain in reserve that's coming shortly, we hope. But Kathy Sherman Morris, welcome to the show tonight, Kathy. But she's a professor in the Department of Geosciences at Mississippi State University, where she studies the human side of meteorology. She's also this year's president-elect for the National Weather Association, and a million other things that she does and has done that we'll talk about. But Kathy, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's nice to be here.
And you'll have impacts to talk about in Mississippi too, because it's been a terrible storm for you too. So I know you've lost power a few times as we were preparing for the show over the last couple of days. So how is Starkville doing right now?
Well, I live in Columbus, which is right next to Starkville, but I have heard that, both places are a real mess with ice and, on the roadways. People are really encouraged to stay in and not go out. The university went to remote learning through Thursday. So no buildings are open except for, essential things on campus. We basically had all the weather, like in 2 days. We had about an 1/8 of an inch of ice. I didn't measure it carefully, but then it was followed by about 2 hours of sleet. And then this morning we also had about 1 inch of snow, and it continued to snow shower for most of the day. So we're not used to this kind of weather.
But you're from Pennsylvania, right?
Yeah, so I am.
You have some snow experience back in your day, I guess.
I've lived in the South for a really long time now, and I don't think I could go out there and drive on it like a native either.
Well, I felt really bad, seeing what everyone's going through, because we've been lucky, James, pretty much, at least in our part of the state. The little bit of snow this morning was kind of a pleasant surprise, but when you see all the other terrible effects. I mean, Texas is in real trouble, Rick, it sounds like, with their power grid.
Yeah, no doubt about it. The power issues down there are just horrible. I mean, I've got people I know, coworkers, colleagues that work at the Weather Service down in Fort Worth that were without power for, I think, 36, 40 plus hours. And some of them have finally come back, and there's probably more that are still out. So yeah, it's a bad situation down there. We've had some compared to that, nothing. They're doing rolling blackouts here in our area and in a lot of areas in the central part of the United States where they, just to conserve energy, cut the power off for selected grids for an hour or two. And that's affected some of us. But yeah, Texas is just, I forgot what the biggest number I saw yesterday was, but just in the tens of millions of customers. That's not even the number of people, customers without power at one point, and some of the coldest weather in quite some time, if not ever.
So you were minus 14 at Oklahoma City, is that right? Is
Yeah,
that
we got
the
to
right
minus
number I saw?
14. Minus 14 this morning. That's the second coldest it's ever been since 1899. Didn't quite make it to minus 17. That would have been an all-time record, but yeah, minus 14. I think we had some readings in the state down close to like minus 22, I want to say. It was minus 14 here in my backyard too.
So no state all-time records threatened, though, probably, but pretty
No,
close.
I think, let's see, the Mesonet, I lost track of all the records, but the Mesonet, I think, let's see, every one of the Oklahoma Mesonet sites, over 100 of them, were below zero this morning. That's never happened. And then I think yesterday morning, over 50 of the Mesonet sites set all-time record lows. Now that hasn't been around since 1899, obviously, but I mean, that's still something. There's been some real cold weather here. So yeah, there's just all kinds of records. I tried to jot some of them down. It's just, I mean, we beat the record low this morning by 18 degrees. I mean, it wasn't close. It was just, it's like Alabama was playing somebody in football. It was just ugly.
Anybody but Oklahoma, right?
Right, not us.
Or Mississippi State, of course. Yeah, well, you cleaned our clock in basketball though a couple of weekends ago and brought some humility back. So that was a good thing. So yeah, what else you got on your notepad there? Because I've been trying to collect some of these superlatives too.
Oh gosh, we've set I think the last 3 days in a row at least, we've set highs for the coldest maximum temperature. It's weird to say the coldest high temperature, but the coldest maximum temperature. And again, we're beating those records by 8, 10 or degrees or more. These are all for Oklahoma City. February 15th, we tied the lowest wind chill ever recorded in Oklahoma City, a minus 27. That the record is still not, the record is 1947. So that's been around for a while too. Kind of hard to find some of that wind chill record data. That's you have to kind of really dig for that. Really, and a record low, minus 6 on February 15th, my record low this morning, minus 14. We only had a high of 4 degrees yesterday. I don't know. We just don't, this could be said for a lot of places, including Starkville, Columbus, all kinds of places. You just don't see this that often. And while it's cool as a meteorologist, the impacts of it kind of suck, I mean, it's not only the power outages, but I've got so many friends and people that I know whose pipes are bursting, pipes are leaking. Mm-hmm. We've got space heaters running in the garage to try to keep pipes from freezing. Water's dripping in all the faucets. Again, this is nothing compared to what some people are going through, but there's this is going to be an ongoing thing, and this is not going to end when the temperature finally gets above freezing this weekend. There's going to be more burst pipes. And so anyway, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, unfortunately, you may not know for a couple more days till all those pipes start coming apart. That's when it's going to be really bad. And when you've been without power for 30, 40 hours, in some cases at single digits or below zero, it's really scary. So how long will y'all have been below freezing when you eventually go back over 32?
Let's see. That's an interesting stat. I think I wrote that down. Oklahoma City, the official ob has been below freezing since about 1 o'clock on February the 8th. The longest period of time we've ever gone on record is 13 days, or about 333 hours, I think the number is. Now, we're not going to get above freezing now. We thought it was going to be Friday. Now it's going to be Saturday afternoon, it looks like. So we're going to bump up against 300 hours below freezing, but I don't think we're going to get to 333. I hope not. People are talking about 45 degrees this weekend being t-shirt weather, and I think people will be out, sunning themselves. If it gets that warm, it's going to feel like a heat wave. But yeah, we'll be close to the record. I don't think we'll get there.
Well, that's just one record we just soon not surpass. So this has to compare pretty closely to the 1899 system, because we hear it thrown around a lot, and it was one of those black swan type things we never thought we'd see again, I guess. So have you done any comparisons to it, Rick?
I have not. I haven't dug a lot into it deeply to do the comparisons. I'd be very interested to know more about that, and I will dig into it, but I haven't yet. We've been scrambling around. We're still working from home and teleworking and trying to split the duties between the office and the house, and trying to figure out how to do that and manage the workload and things like that. So I haven't, but yeah, I mean, you hear about 1899, you hear about more recently 1947, 1983. Lots of people around here remember 1983. I wasn't here at that time, but yeah, this is up there, and in the it could be worse department, I think I tweeted something or posted something within the last couple of days. The state record temperature, and I think the state record wind chill is like -47, and that was set back in 2011. 2011 is a year we'd all like to forget, but there's been colder periods, there's been worse periods, but certainly the widespread nature of this, the extended period of it, it's all the cold weather I need for a while.
James, we remember 1983 pretty well. I mean, were you in Dallas then? You may have been in Dallas in 1983, were you?
I was in Birmingham in 1983. Went to Dallas in 84. So, yeah, I think we hit, what, one degree? I lose track.
I don't remember. Yeah, that was a crazy
We
time.
had 83. We had 89. That was a big Arctic outbreak.
Right.
They were both pretty nasty.
They were coming fast and furious back then, but this one, I forecast for 31 hotels, and 19 of them have been impacted. 4 have been without power for at least 36 hours at this point, and including one of the hardest hit places, which is Waco. I don't know about hardest hit overall, but for us, it's been hardest hit. Because the hotel basically, lost all of its guests because of that. But it's really been and I know Troy's not here tonight, but we're doing all this, James, basically without our real National Weather Service chat. We're using a nice substitute here in Alabama, but I don't know if everybody had the
we gotta fix this. We at some point you just got to say this whole thing's not working. And, instead, well, it's going to take us a year to do research and a year to get a new system operational and a year to do forget that. I mean, we need it yesterday. And during a major winter weather event, Weather Service chat was down. So I'm not going to drag Rick into this because I don't want to drag him into it. But
don't get me started. Don't get me started.
Yeah, it's like we use Slack for our spotters that are with our TV station, the volunteer spotters that have been trained by Brian, and there are hundreds of them. It is an incredibly dynamic, robust platform. And this is what Weather Service chat should be. It's really, really good. And why don't we just move over to Slack? I mean, so anyway, I'm going to get sidetracked in a rant. So I'll stop and we'll move on. But if anybody's listening with the Weather Service, we got to fix this. Rick, I mean,
the most important tool we have. We talk about, I can't go too much, but talk about decision support services. It is the most important tool we have. It is the epitome, the definition of a decision support services. There's so many awesome things that happen because of that. And we got to have it, and it's got to work. It's got to be reliable. And we built up hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of new users of NWS chat over the years. We broke it basically a few years ago when some big severe weather event. And anyway, I could go on and on, but yes, we would very much like to have reliable, steady, sturdy system that we don't have to cross our fingers and hope it doesn't crash in the middle of something big.
And even when it works, which is rare these days, it's not a 2021 type platform. It's something that was okay 15 years ago. I can't share a photograph. I can't share a video. I can't do anything like that. I mean, what you need to do is go look at Slack and come up with something that's similar to that. It doesn't have to be that robust, but the main thing, it does have to work. It's got to work consistently, and it's got to work when you've got a big time, high impact weather event that might kill people. And you've got emergency managers, the weather service, and broadcast meteorologists, the integrated warning team working together to save lives, and we can't even communicate. This is like nuts. And every time you mention it to somebody, you get the deer in the headlights. It looks like, well, we got to do a little research, and we got to do a little this, a little bit of that, do some social science. And no, you don't. Let's just move to something that works right now while you do all that. So, Bill, I'm sorry, you got me going here.
No, that's a good thing to get going on. We need some skunk work, James.
So there's an email that I just got from how can I say this with it? I'm kind of like Rick. I have to dance around this because it's kind of a private email, but it's somebody that is retired, that is within the weather service, and this person is extremely frustrated. And I will tell you, within the weather service, there's a lot of really frustrated people, but he believes that maybe some leadership up at the National Weather Service. I should have gotten on Louis on this thing, when he was on a few weeks ago. But anyway, I'm going to, and again, I don't want to do it in an ugly way. There's no point in being confrontational, but you do have to be bold and say, goodness, you got to prioritize things. You got all kinds of IT problems and all these issues, but you got to prioritize things. And this has got to be a very high priority item. It is critical in this whole communication process within the weather enterprise. It started out with me and Tom Bradshaw and Ron Murphy having lunch at the O'Charlie's at 119 and I-65, and we started using Yahoo Chat. And I was in the genesis of this thing, and I just hate to see its conditions. So anyway, I will do some work and report back on WeatherBrains here in a week or two.
Boy, that could be.
We'll have a new National Weather Service chat by next Monday night, Rick. Rick says, "Don't hold your breath." So,
yeah,
Rick, you reach into Texas, and the grid problem is just appalling to me, because I think more power is produced in Texas than in any other state, obviously, because it's very large. But how did this happen? How did we lose the grid?
I don't know enough of the background to know. I mean, I've seen just discussions on social media, and that's a dangerous place to get your hard information from, as we know. But there's a lot of talk about wind energy and how the wind has been taken offline, and I guess it just takes a little bit of ice on those blades to really reduce the efficiency or make them not even able to run. But I really don't know. It gets into natural gas versus coal versus wind and things like that. I don't. It's just baffling to me how it happens or why it happens. I don't completely understand it, or don't even begin to understand it. But it's amazing. And you think about I don't know, these apocalyptic movies, these movies about the end of the world or the Walking Dead or the whatever, the day after tomorrow, and think about this thing in Texas happening nationwide. I mean, it really just shows you how fragile and vulnerable we are to, how reliant we are on the power and the heat. And, we're talking about electric power, but the natural gas industry here is really struggling, and they're on the verge of real big problems if they aren't able to curtail usage somehow over the next few days here. And, if our power goes out, we've at least got a gas fireplace in the living room we can turn on and get some heat. But think if your gas goes out too, there goes your water heater, there goes your, I don't know. I'm not answering your question because I don't have an answer, but I don't know. That would be an interesting topic to dig further into.
So, Kathy, maybe a big disaster like this will cause a lot of focus to be put on infrastructure and all these issues that we're dealing with. So maybe some good things will come out of this terrible situation.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if something didn't happen with power as a result of this. I mean, nothing's easy, right? So they're not going to be able to make sure that this doesn't happen again right away. But yeah, I agree. I'd be surprised if attention wasn't paid.
And I had heard the number 46% of power in Texas comes from wind. Is that even possible? Rick Smith, that seemed awfully high to me. Does that number sound right or correct or low or high?
I don't know. I've seen much lower numbers this afternoon floating around, more in the 10 to 15% range or 20%. I don't know. Don't quote me on that, but it's that number seems high just based on what little I've seen.
I would have thought so too. So it came from a fairly good source, but it said last week 46% was generated from wind. I don't know if that's a variable number or something like that. It can be
variable, and I know there were calls today, and there's been things in the news too about, even we're expecting with even a little bit of snow, even with not a huge amount of snow or ice or anything like that, they're expecting the wind production and for Oklahoma Energy to go to almost zero again tomorrow. And that it's enough to have an impact. It's enough to go from a level two. I've become very familiar with these levels in the past 24 hours. From a level 2, where it's just like you better conserve energy or something bad's going to happen, to a level 3 where they start turning off your power for an hour or two at a time. And it's enough to make a difference in that. Just the fact that you take wind energy offline is enough to cause those types of rolling blackouts to happen. So it may not be a huge number as far as percentage, but it plays a big role.
Now, I've heard talk. Kathy, go ahead.
While we were talking, I pulled up a lecture from my applied climatology class. In 2015, it was 10% for Texas. Some states are quite a bit, we're quite a bit higher. So I imagine it's continued to grow since then, a little bit older.
So how much is the problem that Texas has an independent grid? And I don't really know what that means overall, but I guess, James, that means in Alabama, our grid is sort of interrelated with neighboring states so that they can shift load if they need to. Maybe you know something about that. Be nice to hear somebody from Southern Company or somewhere, one of our major utilities, talk about that. But I've been hearing that because Texas has an independent grid, that it's made it harder. Do you have any of y'all heard anything about that?
I have not.
I don't know enough about it to comment. It's just like, you hear things, but tell them what you know and don't tell them what you don't know. I don't know enough about the grid and how it works. We ought to get somebody with a utility on here sometime and do.
Yeah, we really should. It's just like shows
it's a big deal
coming out our ears here. And
then
you started
areas where weather and society, interface is with energy.
Yeah, we can't do it without it. But Rick, we started out with that 100-car pileup in Fort Worth on the 11th. I mean, that was insane, and there've been numerous multi-car accidents like that.
Yeah, it was insane, and it was just it wasn't due to 8 inches of snow or a blizzard or a major ice storm. It was just freezing drizzle, if I'm correct, if I'm remembering it correctly. I mean, we had accidents here that were 20 or 30 or 40 cars, but that was horrible. I mean, that was just amazing. The impacts of just a little bit of mist when it's 28, 29 degrees anywhere, but especially in the Metroplex is just outrageous. I lived down there for 3 years, and one of the most treacherous trips I ever took was from the federal building in downtown Fort Worth, where I worked, to my house in South Arlington. I think it took, I don't know how many hours it took, but all there was freezing drizzle. And it was just like, you kiss the ground when you get out of the car when you get home, because it's that freezing drizzle. We've determined in our office, freezing drizzle is just about the worst winter weather event to work. I mean, ice storms are impactful, obviously, but freezing drizzle just sneaks up on you, and then it's just a skating rink that you can't do anything about. But yeah, that's very, very tragic, very, very horrible. And just some of the video that was just hard to watch.
And then we end up with a tornado that killed 3 people in Brunswick County, North Carolina last night, right?
Yeah, I think
didn't
so.
surprise me.
A little bit of that. But I guess it got rated. I think the final rating was a high-end EF3, like 160 mile an hour winds. I think they came up with. So I know there was not a lot of structures, thankfully, that it hit, but the survey team did find enough to rate it high. And some of that damage is, I mean, you guys have seen it frequently. I mean, it looked every bit of that.
So James, were you pleased? I mean, overall, I thought our forecasts here were pretty good from the Alabama standpoint.
Well, the snow,
any comments on it?
you had some haters. Look, I say this all the time when it comes to winter storms down here, at least at this latitude. I don't know what they say in the higher latitudes, but at this latitude, one of my famous lines is, there will always be a surprise. I don't exactly know what it is, because if I did, it wouldn't be a surprise. So the surprise with this event for us was the snow that came down. And those surprises are okay. That people don't get that mad about it. If it was the other way around, if you forecast snow and it doesn't happen, the kids will put you in the hospital. But other than that, I thought it worked out pretty well. I thought that the placement of the ice accretion was good. I thought the timing was good. The messaging was good. And it's always a little hard. One of the things I noticed yesterday, so you're on television, you got 2 minutes. I mean, boy, that is not a lot of time. And so you've got a map where you've got some counties under a winter storm watch, some counties under a ice storm warning, some counties under a winter weather advisory. And you almost feel obliged to kind of go through those advisories and explain all of this. And that you're into this because of this and this and this. And before you know it, you've eaten up all your time without really explaining the weather situation that well. So, but I think we did okay. I mean, all things considered. So had a little Weather Service CWA bugaboo, I think, this morning. People in a certain county in my state got really mad because they're in one CWA and that office decided not to issue an advisory for the snow that was falling, where the other one did. But anyway, that's, we'll work all that out. But I thought a long answer to your question, yes, I thought the forecast was pretty good for this event where we are down here in the Southeast.
Well, and I just got a message from Kim that she's going to join us. So I'm glad I've been stretching here, James, waiting for Chris and Kim to maybe join us, Kathy, before we get to the reason that we've asked you on tonight. But why don't you kind of take us, Kathy, unless James, unless you or Rick or Kathy want to talk any more about the storm we've just gone through. Is there anything else we need to throw out there?
How'd the forecast go in Mississippi, Kathy? It looked like it was pretty good over there from Jackson.
I think so, yeah. I mean, it might have shifted a tiny bit, but yeah, a couple of days out, I think we knew what to expect.
Well,
maybe we're getting better at snow forecasting in the deep South, Bill. Who knows?
Well, I did feel like we kind of did have a better handle on this one. Now, the next one will humble us. I was pleased to see the little bit of snow this morning, but I'm sure there were a lot of haters who probably took advantage of that opportunity. The
haters come after me. You guys don't hear from the haters. They're going to come after me. So it's like they're not going to send Bill Murray that nasty F-bomb, profanity laden. It's going to come right back to me. So you guys are, but again, really, I've not gotten that much negative feedback on this thing today. It's been pretty quiet. The biggest problem I've got, gosh, I need some of you social scientists to figure this out, is this maddening social media problem with people fighting. And I mean, it's beyond fighting. It becomes threats, deep threats of violence against each other. Why are these
people not going to jail for these threats? I can't even imagine threatening someone on social media. I would expect the FBI at my door within an hour.
But it used to be, I just forecast the weather. It used to be you just worry about forecasting the weather. Now you have to be a sheriff and police up all these social media platforms where you've got, again, really, and I'm talking severe threats of violence against one another. It is like watching a bar brawl online with people using their real names, and you can look at their Facebook profile. And, I ban them. If it gets totally out of hand, I just block them, ban them. But it's such a big problem that you deal with it almost every day. And again, if they threaten me, that's fine. I don't care. It's so fine. I've seen it. I've heard. You can't rattle me. But when they start threatening each other, it becomes problematic. And I don't have time for that. And then you got these spam bots, that are on there, the fake James Spann accounts. They're all over the place. There's one on there now trying to get people's, personal information. Hey, you're going to be a prize winner. And it's got my picture and it looks like me. And some of these older people don't know, and they're going to give them their personal information. So I'm having to police these spam bots, the people that are fighting, the haters, the trolls. I ain't got time for that. And we were talking about this in the pre-show. By the time I get to an event, I don't know if Rick, you feel this way. By the time the event starts, I am so physically exhausted. My brain is mush. And it's just like you need to be at the top of your game when that event is going on. And all of this stuff just sucks your energy. It just sucks the life out of you. So, and I don't think Facebook's ever going to do anything about it. People, I've got some really reliable people that follow me, and they get in there and, they report the threats. They'll do that. But Facebook says it doesn't go against their community standards. The spam bots doesn't go against our community. So they're not going to do anything. And so, but people say turn the comments off, but I get some incredibly valuable information in the comments and some of these posts during tornadoes, severe thunderstorm threats, and all this kind of stuff. So anyway, I'm chasing a bad rabbit here, but I'm working with no sleep, and we've had a big high impact event, and I've dealt with these people for days, and it's like, oh. So.
Yeah, James, I call it anticipatory fatigue. I mean, it's
yes.
It's like by the time the first snowflake falls or the first tornado warning is issued, you've been living and breathing this event 24 hours a day for days, and it's just like by the time you need to really be there at your peak, it's like, oh my God, can we just get this over with? So yeah, it's crazy. And winter storms, this is why I can never work in a coastal office. I mean, I can't imagine the stress with hurricanes and things like that. But yeah, it's real. And winter storms, and one thing I noted, and you mentioned it, James, is I don't think we would get someone complaining. It depends on how much snow we missed. If we got a surprise snow that didn't, that we weren't forecasting, I think the number of people that complain about that would pale by orders of magnitude to the people who are ticked off when we tell them it's going to snow and it doesn't, or they think it's going to snow a certain amount and it doesn't. And it's been relatively quiet, knock on wood, this time around. We haven't had a lot of people coming at us or coming at the TV stations so much as they usually do. But I mean, I think our forecast has been pretty good, aside from a few stray, numbers out there. But it's exhausting. It's mentally exhausting just to keep up with all that.
And I think at some point, that's the thing, having a mental health, and all this stuff is not good for your mental health. It's not good. And I say this all the time, you can't hurt my feelings. I have no feelings left to hurt, but that's not true. I mean, I don't care how old you are, how long you've been doing this, it can affect your mental health. If you have to wade into this abyss of these Facebook comments and deal with this stuff. And you do have fatigue anyway with trying to get the forecast right and get the messaging right and, distribute it properly across radio and television and all these platforms, blogs and YouTube and the social channels. And it's really high stress. And you're exactly right. Anticipatory fatigue is exactly what that thing is. And so we wind up and the big event starts, whether it's a hurricane, a tornado outbreak, a snowstorm, whatever. I got nothing left. Nothing. I mean, you're just exhausted mentally and physically. And I think I need a better way of managing all of this. And I think we all do. So again, it's just part of the equation of we have to be better rounded in terms of our mental health and learning how to handle this stuff, because everybody's got 24 hours in a day and you can't buy a microsecond. You can't generate one. And I have to be better at time management. So Bill, I'm sorry. Kim's on here. Now that Kim's here, we can get off our rants and get to the meat of the discussion.
Oh no, I missed rants. Those are the best. So I heard those.
It's never too late for rants, Kim.
Right. Good. Because I reserve the right to go on rants. I mean, this has been such a rant-worthy week, year. It's good to be with you all. Sorry for missing the notes earlier, but I'm part of the affected area where we've had periodic power outages, and my kids are home because we're all stuck inside, and everything else. It's just we feel very, very fortunate that we've been able to keep warm compared to our neighbors to the south. And man, what a couple of days this has been. So just glad that I was able to jump on with all of you.
Well, we're really glad of that too, Kim. So anything you want to throw? We were sort of compiling notes on the winter storm, and anything that's really struck you that is a takeaway or something really memorable.
Oh man, there are a lot of takeaways. I think one of the things that's been really interesting to me to see has been, I think that the disappointment yet again in the, our colleagues in the meteorological community that there's a catastrophe that's taken place, even though there was a terrific forecast in place. And that's been the story for many years. In part, it's what breathed into life the Weather Ready Nation movement. I'd say it was something that the Weather Service started, but the whole weather community has been on board with it. And it's important for us to recognize that we're only a component of this. The forecast is only a component of this. It looks like a lot of what went on is, it's stuff that's beyond the control of the forecasters, and even stuff that couldn't have been changed in just a week's time. You can see that event coming. And I think the people who are running the utilities in Texas knew about this, saw it coming. And it turns out that if there hadn't been different kinds of infrastructure put into place, probably months before, then there wasn't a whole lot they were going to be able to do but try to bat around the situation when they saw it. And that is a really important thing for us to internalize, that there's a chain, there are a whole series of other people involved in making decisions about the risk and deciding how to mitigate it, how it's appropriate for their people. It's a political process, and we should take it to heart. We might hear some really disappointing news, really devastating news in the days to come. And I think it's really, really important for our listening audience in Texas and across the South, where they're also getting various kinds of weather and impacts, that this is, each life lost is not just on you. It is a whole infrastructure that is involved in mitigating the effects of the hazard. So I think that's been one of the things I've been sad to see it again, is a lot of our colleagues just taking it in and making it a part of them. And it is hard, but please don't make it that hard.
Well,
Many people get into the weather business because they want to help people, in addition to loving the science of it, I think. So I think it's natural for people to internalize that, but you're absolutely right, Kim.
Well, as worried as we've been about the infrastructure for many years, it seems like, maybe some good things will come out of this. Do y'all think? I mean, do you believe, Kim, that a light will get, shined on this situation, and maybe some positive will come out of it, even though we've been hearing about it for 10 years, how vulnerable our electric grid is. Now this is a shining example of something's got to happen.
I hope so. There are a lot of complexities that go into the Texas situation in particular, but our whole grid, we've been having conversations for a couple of years about this. It's really been an ongoing conversation nationally since the big blackouts in the early 2000s and in the Northeast. And then space weather brought it into focus for us. The meteorological community, the space weather community was really involved in a huge effort nationally to try to bolster our capabilities to respond and protect our power infrastructure in other ways. So yeah, this is a moment that I hope can be embraced in the places where they need to embrace it. My fear is, since it's been such an awful political year, and like you guys were talking about when I came on, everyone is just up to here with living through another historic catastrophe. I think it's really going to remain to be seen just how much anyone's able to really take this in and do much with it. Have you guys had a conversation about this being sort of an unexpected COVID and weather situation? I don't think this is one that anyone was ready for or contemplated. Seeing a lot of head shakes.
No, we were going to bring that up, but this is a good time to talk about that, Kim. So expound on that.
I will, and I'll bring up, I would love to know what the panel has observed of this. I personally haven't heard a lot said for the people who are in power affected, the sort of power loss areas, how they should consider approaching things like sheltering with other people and going to community shelters in an era of COVID. This has been a really big conversation during tornado season and then hurricane season. And I know emergency managers did a whole lot to prepare ahead of time for those kinds of contingencies. Of course, tornadoes didn't have a whole lot of time to prepare, had to kind of figure it out on the spot, but at least there was some ability to prepare. But this, I think that the particular impact on the power grid people didn't necessarily foresee. And so some of the stuff had to be kind of made up as people went along. Has anyone been aware of much that's gone on at that intersection to advise people? Because I mean, the advice I've seen go out is people in text there saying, people go to another house. You know, if you know someone who has power, go.
I haven't heard a lot, but yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, it's similar to the dilemma we had last March and April, dealing with, well, what do we do with tornado people going to tornado shelters, community shelters, and what do you protect yourself from? The most imminent threat of the tornado or from the virus, or how do you do both? And yeah, and this is certainly something that the intersection that I've encountered just this past week is conversations going on. One of the things that they were prepping for here in Oklahoma with all the snow is to rescue people off the interstates and stranded motorists. And that, you would think that doesn't have a lot to do with COVID, but what if you pick up people out of a vehicle that are stranded out on the side of the interstate and they don't have masks? Do the crews that are picking them up have masks or PPE to provide to them? And that's something I'd never thought of before until I was on the call and heard that. And I was like, wow, that is those two crashing into each other directly. That, you know, you're rescuing someone from freezing to death on the side of the road, but you've still got to take into account this pandemic that's going on.
Yeah, and I look back on an event like our Snowmageddon here in 2014, and strangers were taking in strangers. People were sleeping on the floor in the Walgreens and the Walmart. You had strangers hopping in other cars. I mean, people were literally helping everybody else. It was an amazing humanitarian effort where all of a sudden we weren't enemies. We didn't hate each other. Everybody loved everybody else and they were trying to help. But all of a sudden now, you know, how do you respond? With this stuff going on, and it's horribly confusing. You know, you're going to turn somebody away that's outside freezing, that needs to come into your house. Obviously, you're not going to do that, but you have to think, well, what are they going to bring in here? So I agree, Kim. It's a very challenging situation for all of us right now.
And lots of communities do have warming shelters set up. I know Oklahoma City has some of those. Some of the more rural areas have those, and I'm sure any place that's a warming shelter right now in the state of Texas is probably getting, I don't know, you know, if people don't have family or friends to go to, people are probably crowding into those. So it's an issue.
Well, and plus we were just beginning to see some glimmers of hope, you know, that maybe things were getting better, and this could really set us back, I fear.
I was going to say, I think there are ways to mitigate the COVID risks, though. Like I've seen images of the warming shelters where they have cots that are placed, 12 feet apart, requiring people to wear masks, having hand sanitizer, some of those things. I mean, the risk that's confronting you if you don't have power for 36 hours and it's 2 degrees out is very real. And statistically, you might be more likely to be affected by that than, somebody having the virus. So, I mean, just weigh the risks and, take care of yourself. I think there are ways that emergency managers and whomever are in charge of the warming shelters can try to take care of both risks at the same time.
If there's any silver lining to this, it may be that these emergency managers and public health officials have practice from the hurricane season, because a lot of these affected areas are the places that had hurricanes or the threat of them this past year. And so you're right, Kathy, a lot of that sounds like the same preparations that they made, they probably just pulled that out and did the same thing as they had done for hurricanes to make this happen. It'd be really interesting to talk with somebody about this angle, how they've managed this intersection. And I agree. I was texting some of my colleagues in the we have a behavioral insights team I'm a part of at the lab, and you guys all know how seriously I've taken COVID this entire time. But when you're facing those temperatures and that dire of a situation, I mean, at one point last night, it was at least a third of the ERCOT, which is one of the big service providers for Texas Power. A third of that system was down. The third of the customers didn't have power, and when you're looking at that you have to survive the night, and you have to be thinking about that. I just feel horrified for the people of Texas, and that as with most disasters, it's the people who are least able to adapt, people who don't have the finances, who don't have things like a nice coat, who don't have a well-insulated house, who don't have these other things. They're going to be the people who have the hardest time with COVID as well. They tend to be people who have more of the health-related comorbidities and everything else. So my heart just really goes out. I know I keep saying Texas, but it's really been across the plains and the South. And Kathy, I understood that you were affected too. You guys had some ice, and you're getting some more probably ice there. What's this been like for you out in Mississippi, and then into Alabama? We've all been affected.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's really just been an inconvenience. We lost power like 4 times, but never more than an hour. So it's just, you got to eat quick, and I was a little worried for tonight that we'd lose it, and we might still lose it sometime in the middle. But yeah, so it's just been a slight nuisance to deal with for us. Nothing at all like the people in Texas.
Good. That's good.
But Kim, you spend a lot of time in our political side. What's your hope that we can begin to come together politically as a country and fix a lot of the problems that we have? That's not the response that I wanted.
I tend to be like I'm so torn on this, because I'm at heart such an optimistic person and believe so much in people, and I still do. I think that there are a lot of things working against us in this particular moment nationally, and it's gonna be tough to see. We'll be much better off if we do. That's the only thing that I know, is we'll be so much better off if we can do that, if we can get together and find a way through the problems together, and not, it's so natural to get angry and try to look for someone to blame. And there's so many things going on right now that can make people so angry. And I don't blame people for feeling angry. I just really hope that we can find our better angels, and maybe see that things have gotten so far, we hit a turning point and just all communally say, this isn't what we want. So I'm fingers are crossed. But I don't know bottom quite yet. We'll see. It's 2021 is not impressing me so far. I was hoping that we'd hit a turnaround point, but it's not impressing me so far.
Yeah. 2021 sort of looking at 2020 and saying, hold my beer. This is not good. I'm really excited now because we finally have the whole gang together. Tonight's second guest WeatherBrain has joined us, and he may not have as much time, but he's a lecturer in the Department of Geosciences at Mississippi State University, the chief meteorologist at KAGS in Bryan, Texas, and has a tremendous amount of diverse research interests, including public perception of weather information and public response to hazards. Christopher Nunley, welcome to the show.
Hey, everybody. Sorry for being late. It has been chaotic, to say the least.
Well, I think you're actually early to the original time. And if we weren't just shifting things around every 10 minutes, Chris, you would actually be early. So we'll give you credit for that, and just be glad you're here.
Well, I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having Kathy and I.
Now, we've been talking about the winter storm for nearly an hour here. Talk about the impact there in the Brazos Valley, the Bryan College Station area, because it's been very significant, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's bad. So we picked up about 1/4 of an inch of freezing rain, followed by about 1/2 an inch of sleet. And then depending on which part of the Brazos Valley you're in, anywhere from 3 to 8 inches of snow. The like powder though, what you see in the Rockies, not the typical snow that we see. So the impact, the infrastructure here is just not designed to handle this type of winter weather, the cold temperatures, as well as the amount of ice that we picked up. So as you can imagine, it's pretty bad. And we actually have our second winter storm moving in as we speak. There's already freezing drizzle out here. We're expecting anywhere between 1/4 to 1/2 an inch in the BCS area, and then our northern zone is going to pick up about 1 inch of freezing rain, followed by probably about 1 inch of snow early Thursday. So we're kind of in it for the long haul, but a lot of stuff still shut down. Gas stations are out of gas. The stores here have limited hours. So a lot of the lines, people are standing outside in the cold for 4 hours to get in, and everything's out. The water, eggs, milk, bread, the shelves are cleared. So people didn't prepare for what happened, unfortunately. Oh yeah, and then the power. We have power for like 15 minutes, and then it's out for like 4 hours. 15 minutes out for 4 hours, and we have some people. One of my coworkers here, which is unfortunate. She just started. She's my co-anchor. She hasn't had power for over 30 hours, and a pipe burst in her apartment. Her whole apartment is flooded. This just happened. Yeah, so it's been pretty wild to say the least.
Well, I'm afraid there are going to be a million of those stories before this is over. And it's heartbreaking in every way. Talk about some of the ingenuity and travails that you and your team members at your station have gone through this week, just to get the message out to your viewers. Chris, it's been pretty impressive.
Well, I think we did very well with the leading up to the winter storm and during the winter storm as the snow was falling. So we had a full crew out in the storm, bringing the latest information. And we've been talking about this for about 2 weeks, that there were signals there that it was going to get cold. We didn't know if we were going to take a direct hit from that Arctic high, but we knew that we would see at least like a backboard push of the colder air. So we've been on it for a couple of weeks, and about a week out, we knew that we were going to see some pretty significant impacts, and the probability of seeing significant or at least accumulating ice was there. So we'd been on it for a while. However, things have gotten difficult over the past 2 days because we lost power here in our station, which we're owned by Tegna. I think we're the only Tegna station that does not have a generator. So last night we didn't have a 6. So I do like the 6 and the 10. We weren't able to have any newscasts until 10, and it was only a Facebook Live. We tried to do a 6. We were outside for a couple hours with a live pack trying to get a signal to do it. So we're out, 10-degree weather, wind chills around 0 for 2 hours trying to get something up, and we couldn't get anything up. We were trying to run it through our station in Jacksonville, Florida. And then finally we were able to get something up at 10. But we're working with the skeleton crew, and today we haven't had any newscast either. We tried to have a 6 o'clock because the power came on for about 15 minutes and then it went right back out. So it's been pretty difficult, to be honest. But leading up to the storm, we were all hands on deck, and I think it went really well. And I think we really prepared and served our community and let them know that if they watched and they listened, they were well aware of the magnitude of the cold, as well as just like how prolonged of an event it was going to be. But now it's a little more difficult. It's trying to get stuff out on social media, which is difficult because I don't have my graphic system working, because obviously it's here at the station. So I was able to get out some graphics today. Last night I contacted our sister station in Houston, KHOU, and I got some graphics for their DMA because they kind of overlap to an extent. They at least talk about Brenham and Bryan College Station, and that's where most of our population is. So I was able to use some of their graphics during the Facebook Live, But yeah, it's been a struggle over the past 48 hours.
So James, talk about that for a minute. You know, you don't think about the television station losing power. How much generation power do y'all have at your Sinclair station?
It's complicated. We have a really complex infrastructure. We have a generator at the studio, and our transmitter locations are not at the studio. So we have a generator at the studio, a generator at the high-powered 33 site, at the high-powered 40 site, and also at a hub up on Red Mountain. And I always try and communicate with the chief engineer before high-impact events. And if it's going to be a big deal, we'll just go on the generator before it even starts at all these places. To be in theory, the transfer switch should just happen and you don't notice it, but I don't trust it. So, but generators are just crucial to have. We need to talk with the Tegna guys. I'll see what I can do.
Try. We're dead. So ironically, we don't even have an engineer at our station. I know that's hard to believe. There are sirens. I'm sure you can hear them. We have 2 Tegna stations in our market. We have KCEN, which is in just west of Waco. They're in Colleen. And then we have KAGS here at Bryan College Station. And we're not a bureau or a satellite, but we're it kind of seems like it's structured that way. So we don't have an engineer or a generator. So it makes things extremely difficult. But I did let management know that this was going to happen a week in advance. So I tried to do my job to prepare everybody for it. Just kind of undermanned and don't have the full amount of resources, unfortunately. But I'm sure that's going to change now after this event. But whatever you can do, James, to help out.
Yeah, like they're going to listen to me.
We need a generator.
Yeah.
Well, they won't listen to anybody.
I'll tell you, the story of the Huntsville guys up in Huntsville, Alabama. There's a horrible tornado in 1989 that came through. And I want to say one station had a generator. And that station obviously owned the story and owned, it was, and then everybody else got one. So hopefully, everybody will get one at some point. They are pricey and I'll be honest with you. I mean, most days I reach more people on social media than television. I mean, television is not the critical line that it used to be, but it's still pretty darned important. And you got to be on the air. You got to be on the air. So
yeah, especially during high impact events, I feel like people really tune in on air more frequently during something like this. So it's really unfortunate not to broadcast a newscast or a weathercast when you have
and during a crisis, your phone is going to stop working probably. The cell sites go down, and you can't get on the Facebag and the Tweeter, and what are you going to do? You're going to wind up trying to pick up something over the air, whether it's a local radio station or a TV station. Go back to the old school stuff, and it's like weather radio. It's very important. So hopefully somebody will figure it out at Tegna.
I also should mention that I love Tegna. I'm really happy to be a part of it. We just have some limitations at this station, but I'm really happy with Tegna. I love it. I love the diversity. They're creative, just a really innovative, accepting company. So I'm really happy to be a part of it. But as you can imagine, every station, every company sometimes does have some areas they can improve in. Just like I have areas that I can improve in as a lecturer as well as an on-air personality.
Well, we know you are Dr. Sherman Morris is one of her prize students, so we're glad you're with us, Chris. Rick, I was just thinking it's going to be a really good time to be in the generator business in the next 12 months across much of the United States.
Oh my gosh, I forgot who it was on Twitter that was posting locations where generators are available in Tulsa or somewhere in Oklahoma City over the past couple of days. I mean, I think they're pretty hot properties. We had an ice storm back in October, and I know I got to know my neighbors. I could hear them, the ones that had generators nearby. But yeah, I mean, it's something I've always wanted, and every one of these events, I say, okay, I'm getting one now, but I still don't.
But you better mount that sucker in concrete, because it'll probably walk if it's portable.
That's for sure. They're a hot commodity.
And Rick, you were going to mention something, and I missed over it while we were trying to get Chris on the air and everything. You were going to give an important comment about COVID
Well,
and the situation. So throw that in there.
yeah, I don't want to divert back too much, but I was thinking there's another COVID connection to the weather that we've been dealing with indirectly, is how many vaccination clinics have been canceled because of the winter storm. I mean, we provided decision support to health departments who are asking a week in advance. You know, we have a whole series of these pods scheduled next week to get vaccines, and they ended up canceling them based on a forecast, probably a good call. But I mean, tens of thousands of vaccines didn't get, and just in our area, and that's not nationwide or across the whole South. That's an issue. And then another real concern that we got every time we did a briefing was the concern over power outages. Now, we were thinking of power outages due to ice on power lines or trees or things like that. I wasn't anticipating this kind of thing, but you know, you can only, if you lose refrigeration with the vaccines or the freezer, you know, of course you could just take them outside around here, but you know, that's a concern. So weather is definitely have a lot of overlaps with this, but that was another one I just wanted to mention, that, you know, just the vaccination clinics and the pods that didn't get done, and how would they ever make that up? I mean, that was pressure on the forecasters to think, okay, if I give them this forecast and they go on it, then there's 1,800 senior citizens who thought they were getting the vaccine next Tuesday who all of a sudden aren't, and how will they ever reschedule them? So anyway, that was just another connection there I wanted to bring up.
Well, I know how they're rescheduling them because my parents were some of the senior citizens in that pool. They were supposed to get the second round of the COVID vaccine yesterday on Monday. And as we saw the forecast limiting out, I started to ask the question, have they talked with you? Have they given you any indication of what their plan is? And they booted them to Thursday first, and to Wednesday first. And I looked at that and I said, well, that's a plan. At least they're getting the process started of just scooting things along. Now it's Friday. So I think they're probably just taking everybody and just shifting it forward in time. And if it's just figuring you've got to try to make it, and you know, good luck. It's got to be a priority. I'm grateful that there was some advanced notice. I'm grateful they didn't wait until the last minute to make a decision, because then my parents could plan and we could plan. Everybody could plan around it. And they're just some things you can't make perfect, but I think that the forecast office did a really good job with this. It was going to be even just the temperatures, even if the precipitation amounts were, you know, a little bit in question. These people did better to not be on the road.
Yeah, because I mean, y'all had a bad accident on the Turner Turnpike, didn't you, Rick? The one in Fort Worth got a lot of the attention, but there was a bad one in Oklahoma too, wasn't there?
Yeah, and I think there may have been fatalities with that one. I'm ashamed I don't know, but serious injuries to 18-wheelers, a big fire. Yeah, it was just, you know, very dramatic. So yeah, that's what we were telling the health department people is like, you know, if we get 2 inches of snow or 12 inches of snow, it's still going to be horribly cold to even step outside your door. So I think that gave them more confidence that, well, even if we don't get this much snow, it's just bad to be out, period. So I think they were comfortable with that decision.
Well, I'm excited that we have the whole gang here now. The purpose of tonight's show was to talk about a paper that Chris and Dr. Sherman Morris did called "What People Know About the Weather." And the objective of that study, of course, was to better understand self-perceived and assessed weather knowledge of the participants. Because your study looks at this Dunning-Kruger effect, I know Kim probably knows that like the back of her hand, but something that was new to me, the DK effect. Explain to us what that is. And who wants to start? Kathy, do you want to start, or Chris, do you want to start? And then we'll just kind of go back and forth, or what do y'all say?
Kathy, you can go first.
There we go. Chris says you go, Kathy.
All right. So what is the effect?
Yeah, what's the DK effect?
It's the idea that people who know less about a topic or who are less skilled at doing something think that they are more skilled or that they know more about that subject or topic or whatever than they do. And the thing is that the people with the least amount of skill or knowledge are more likely to be the ones to mostly overestimate their skills or their knowledge.
Well, that's obviously dangerous, and I'm sure none of us know anybody like that out there in the world. But you had to sit down and think about why to do this, Chris. Why did you choose to study this topic in terms of meteorology? Obviously, you're a meteorologist. Why did you pick this topic?
It just really intrigued me. Being active on social media, having a weather page before I even got into the business, I noticed a lot of people who didn't know what they were talking about were very vocal on social media. So it just really sparked an interest. Like, wow, it was a pattern. I just saw a lot of people who were very vocal who didn't know what they were talking about. So that's kind of what initially intrigued me and what kind of stemmed the research that led to this paper.
So Rick had the line of the night, even though it may not make it to be the show title. Rick, you want to say what your response was to all of us knowing some of those folks?
I was, I just thought what Kathy was describing was Twitter, basically. So, Twitter in particular.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's the line of the night. I don't know how we'll shovel that into a show title, Rick, but it certainly is worthy of consideration for sure. So obviously, taking complex ideas and simplifying them is necessary in communicating with the public, especially in our everyday forecasts and warnings. But you note that oversimplification can cause harm if the public believes they're informed, even though they may lack that fundamental knowledge. So how can we as meteorologists kind of overcome that? Who wants to take that, Chris or you, Kathy?
That sounds like a question for the TV meteorologist.
There we go. Take it, Chris.
Well, let me think on that for a second. James, would you like to hop in for a second and let me?
He's sidling up to the microphone.
James,
No. Listen, here's the thing about me. I need to learn how to communicate. I really do. My first major in college was electrical engineering, and I finished in meteorology. I don't know anything about this. As long as I've been doing this, that doesn't necessarily make you an expert in learning communication techniques and messaging techniques. It's important. And I think as I get older, I know how much I don't know about it. So that's why we need smart people like you and Kathy to figure this out and help us take a complex subject and how do you teach and how do you communicate that? I mean, it's like I say, I struggle a little bit with this thing, this week with the messaging, because how much time do you get, Chris, on TV? How much time they give you?
Oh, I fight for a lot. Typically I get 3:30 for main weather, which I feel like is a lot compared. Our sister station, that's the same station as Market, he gets 2 minutes for weather.
Yeah, it seems like the bigger market, the smaller amount of time you get.
Yeah.
There are nights I struggle to get more than 2 minutes. And goodness gracious, what do you do in 2 minutes? You got a complex storm that's going to impact the state, where part of the state's going to have a crippling ice storm. Part of the state's going to have a flood threat. Part of the state's going to have the risk of a few tornadoes. In the middle, you might have some flooding going on here. How do you communicate this in 2 minutes? Do you spend time going through all these Weather Service advisories? Do you just blow that off and, get right into it? I mean, that's why I love doing my little YouTube videos. I think that's the best product I can offer. It's the YouTube video thing, because there's no time restriction. I can say whatever I want to, use whatever graphics I want to. But the TV thing, it's hard. So, I need smart people like everybody here to help us.
And let me just jump in to make a comment after James said that about putting stuff on YouTube and on the internet and all that stuff. I have another student who did a thesis, and one of his findings was that people that followed the TV meteorologist online had higher assessed weather knowledge than people that just watched the TV meteorologist, on television. So it's that extra, what can you do in other formats that can help provide people that want that extra content, to help them to learn more.
And I use it extensively. I mean, thank goodness for that. I didn't have that, 30 years ago. We're now, if you want to go make a 20-minute YouTube video, a 2-hour YouTube video, whatever, it's there. You can push it out. You can write. And that's the other thing. I really regret not taking any writing courses. I write like a third grader. That's so powerful because you can write this down, and a lot of people do take the time to read. Not all, but some do. And so that's important as well. But even with all this other stuff, we're learning that a lot of people do not have good reading comprehension. A lot of people cannot understand maps. A map, it's Russian. These fancy TV graphics with maps means nothing to them. And how do we handle that? It's complex. The weather communication to me is a whole massive field that we need to tackle and learn. At least I do.
Yeah. So Rick, is there any formal training for writing still in the Weather Service? I know in the JB day, it used to be a prize thing to get to go to take their writing courses.
Yeah, on my shelf in my office, which I haven't seen in a long time, there's two little booklets. One is called Warning: A Call to Action, and one is called Clear Weather Writing. And it's something you used to do. One of the first things you would do when you got into the Weather Service. This is back even, long before I got in, back in the 70s and 80s. And actually has social science built into it, but, don't say vivid lightning because that makes people want to go out and look. It was things like that, words to use and how to write. But there's not really anything like that in the Weather Service now, that I'm aware of. I mean, we started to get into a little bit more of that with decision support and how to do verbal communication better and things like that. But yeah, that there's not nearly enough of that. And I'm like, James, I wish I had more training in that.
So the how we communicate is a really interesting conversation, and I can't help but wonder, what exactly it is that we're talking about trying to communicate. So Kathy and Chris, can you describe a little bit of what in your study were you actually looking at in terms of, you mentioned it's sort of what this weather knowledge, weather comprehension, what dimensions of that? So, James was talking about a lot of different kinds of things that could be wrapped up in that. You could have map interpretation that could be a part of like a weather salient score. You could have, percentages. Are people able to work with numbers? Are they numerate? Do they have verbal comprehension, of different kinds? All that could factor in. So I'm just kind of curious to know what you were looking at in particular in this discussion of, well, there are people who had less knowledge and then thought that they were doing fine. What is it they don't know that they actually think they're doing fine about?
Yeah, some of it was really simple. As simple as like what the difference is between a watch and a warning, and a lot of people confuse the two. So that was one area we evaluated. Also, we gave some hypothetical scenarios, talking about if based on like what type of like precipitation somebody would see if they knew the difference between like rain, sleet, freezing rain, snow, stuff like that. So they were just really, in our eyes, really simple concepts that a lot of people really didn't know or didn't understand or mixed the two up. I'm trying to think of some others.
I think the difference between the snow, I think that was one where they thought they knew more than they did.
Yeah.
But like we would do one where it was like a meteorological thing, like ingredients for tornadoes or a hurricane or something. And then we would do some things that are more like safety wise, like Chris was saying with the watch and the warning and those kinds of things. So it was sort of a mix.
So with that in mind, if people are starting or if they mix up some of these, some of the terminology or, some of the phrases that we choose to use, knowing that that's the kind of issue that you were seeing out there, but people think that they know, even if they don't necessarily really know. What kinds of recommendations might you have for communicators to work with that? And maybe if not, try to just focus on teaching. There are different perspectives you can take, right? You can sort of take the perspective of, which is I think the earlier conversation, how do we teach people this stuff? How do we get them to actually know what it is we're saying when we use these terms? It could also be that we use different language, or that we try to adjust something about how we're presenting the information. Do you have any suggestions for maybe the latter of those two? How it is that we maybe adjust how we're presenting the information?
One thing that I've tried to do since this research is most of my graphics now actually have a little explainer box in the bottom. So a lot of my graphics have that now. That way it helps people who maybe they're a better visual learner. They'll see that. Or just in general, even if I'm like, hey, like tornado watch, it means like the ingredients are there, X, Y, Z. They also see that in the bottom corner as well. So that's what I've started doing with a lot of my graphics. And I've gotten really good feedback from viewers on that. Even when I post them on social media as well, I have that little box in the bottom left corner. And a lot of viewers really seem to like that. I know there are probably other solutions as well, but that's kind of what I've done. It's been like a quick and easy fix.
I love that, because keeping it, sorry, Kathy, just keep it, it's something that map makers, so cartographers, recommend that you should always consider having a legend with your map. No matter how naturally inferable you think the map is, that people should be able to look at it and just totally understand the symbology on it. And, you know, it's something that they think is ubiquitous and used, you know, everywhere. You'll always find someone for whom it's not naturally understandable in whatever context they're receiving it. So I really appreciate that that is what you've decided to do and gotten really good feedback from that. Sometimes these simple things can make all the difference. So sorry, Kathy, what were your thoughts on the improvement question?
Oh yeah, I mean, I do think that's a great idea, because you always will have people that, you know, they want that extra information, and weather maps are notorious for using colors and symbols that they don't put the legend on. But I'm also a fan of like taking it to where the people are. Like I just saw on social media, Australia has this weather alert system where they have 3 levels of alert, and they just do like, this is the weather, this is the alert, and then they give it a color. It's either yellow, orange, or red, period, for all the hazards. And I was like, that is just brilliant. Because you always know if you're on the highest alert and it's this kind of weather. It's simple. You don't have to worry about advisories or understanding things, or, you know, we overcomplicate things, I think, sometimes. And studies have shown that you really can't educate people into like understanding hazards and taking proper action. I mean, it like what Chris is doing is great, you know, because a lot of people want that anyway, and that helps him interact with his, you know, his audience and to build trust and those kinds of things. But just like telling people what a tornado watch is and telling people what a tornado warning is not necessarily going to translate into, you know, them taking better action. Not necessarily. It can, but I just, you know, public education isn't always the answer.
I agree with Kathy. It's overcomplicated. I feel like we need a uniform symbols and colors throughout meteorology in the U.S. You have different stations using different colors for tornado watches and tornado warnings. People get confused. You have people making these decisions or these calls who don't know how to really, they don't have formal background on how people interpret certain colors. There's a state, I don't know which station is, or if they still do it, but when I was at OU doing undergrad, there was a station that used like green for tornado watch, and it always threw me off. Even though I'm like, I know what a tornado watch is, I'm going to take it seriously. I'm like, why is this green? I can't imagine what the viewers think. They probably think it's a flash flood watch or something. So there were little things like, I just wish like everybody used uniform colors, like symbols that, you know, that are uniform, because people get confused. Even with, I don't know, even with the Storm Prediction Center, for the marginal risk, that green color, I think some people just perceive that as like, oh, they're fine. Like, okay, I'm not going to see any bad weather here. It's green, like we're all good. So just things like that. I wish like everybody used the same color, and I wish that all of the appropriate colors were used for certain risk or hazards.
This reminds me of the discussions that were had over the last couple of years with the Weather Service doing their HAZSIMP program, HAZSIMP meaning hazard simplification. The big broad objective of it at first was to consider whether the Weather Service could pare things down and make them simpler. And Rick, I'll turn to you at this question, because you had been involved in a lot of those conversations and hosted focus groups for the HAZSIMP researchers in the Norman Forecast Office, and had gone to some of the workshops. Can you give us your impression on what was involved in on that process, and how you ended up feeling about is something simple and straightforward possible for us? Is that sort of where it's going? What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I'm kind of like Chris. I'm always thinking it would be better if we were all doing the exact same thing with the same words and colors and numbers and symbols and things like that. But I think the more I talk about it, and even going through some of the HAZSIMP stuff and some of the focus groups, I mean, a lot of our people that came to the focus groups were of that mind too, that it would be nice if we were all doing the same thing. But I don't know, the more, it just seems apparent to me that's never going to happen. I just don't see any way that will ever happen in our world, in our community, even in the small weather community. And I don't know. I think it's a good goal to work toward, but I think it's important to understand too. We need to understand more, I think, how people actually digest and understand and use that information. I mean, there hasn't been a whole lot done that I'm aware of, and Kim and Kathy are the experts to correct me on how does it really confuse people? How do people use it? If they see 3 different colors on 3 different stations, does that matter? So I don't know. I certainly like the goal of moving more toward, and talking to Gina Esco and others, I don't even know which words to use anymore. Uniformity, consistency, all those have different meanings than they used to for me now. And I don't know what the path to that is, or if that's even an attainable goal for us. I rambled with that, Kim. I don't know if I answered even the question you asked.
No, it's great. I think I appreciate that you wandered through a couple of different threads there, because it is complex. It's not just about what the Weather Service is doing, and I think that's been one of the key things HAZSIMP has revolved itself around. Is there's to some degree an irreducible complexity, because there's a public sector and a private sector, and there are, as we have Chris and James here, both, you can speak to the fact that stations compete, and having different kinds of presentations of the information is one way that you can try to offer a differentiated product and perform in that competition. And that's something that has been part of the conversation with SPC graphics. Even just with this, can we try to get on the same page and use one system? It is one color system that, for one kind of hazard. And even then, the communicators involved don't all opt to band together on that. I know in Alabama, you guys have made a real concerted effort to try to get together and get on the same page with that one graphic, that one hazard. I'm really curious to learn a little bit more about the Australia system, because it looks very, very elegant in design, very simple. And I always wonder, with that and the meteor alarm system in Europe, I always wonder about, can that be something that it fits us? One of the things that I understood from the HAZSIMP people too is that our country just has such a diversity of hazards that we experience, and adaptability of populations to those hazards, that the systems might be tough to apply here because impacts are so incredibly variable. I think the winter event we just had is a really good example of this. What are just completely crippling temperatures in Texas are nothing burgers in Montana, and and it all has to do with the people who are exposed and the infrastructure involved. And yeah, I think it sounds like a really interesting direction that the Australians have taken. I just love to learn a little bit more about, what they considered and what maybe we can borrow and learn from their experience. So I really like that suggestion. I like that you raised that. So you feel your research maybe points to, okay, educating the public is kind of a nice thing to do, but also we can consider changing the way we do things to meet their need on the other side of that.
Yeah, and it's not our research or my research. I'm talking about other people that have researched this area as well.
So Kathy, the decay effect involves some gender differences. Talk about what your research revealed regarding men and women's perception about their knowledge of weather. And Kim's grinning like a Cheshire cat. That is not good.
I had to turn my light on because it just shut off automatically. I got distracted for a minute. Yeah, so Chris can correct me, but I was thinking that there wasn't a gender effect in okay, so I'm thinking of two different studies now, and I might get this wrong, so correct me if I'm wrong. But so in our study, men perceive, in most places, I think men perceive that their knowledge is greater than women. So that's, but I want to say in our study, didn't men have higher assessed knowledge too?
I believe so, yeah.
That's not always the case. A lot of times men and women are either equal or even women are slightly higher, even though their perceived knowledge is lower. But I didn't want to mess up that actual result from our study.
Yeah, I think so. Are we about to go on air?
Yeah, I figured out how to transfer all the stuff into my jackass.
Okay, cool.
So you can move that TV on.
We're getting to see how the sausage is made here.
I'll come test it out. Okay. So we've been having craziness at the station. But yeah, no, I believe you're right, Kathy. That was our director. We don't have WSI, so like I'm having to use, it's craziness right now.
So yeah, exactly. So talk about, you hear the expression, if you can't see it, you can't be it, with respect to girls entering STEM programs. So, talk about, how important it is for there to be meteorological role models that are women. We have it in our, in our school system here. There's a teacher who's been on this program before, a lady named Diane McAlilly, who's obviously a really good example for her female students. And when she became the robotics instructor, suddenly there were lots of girls who wanted to be a part of robotics. And so how important is that, from what you've seen in meteorology?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very important. Women have come a long way in representation in the field in the last 20 or so years. We also see it with people of color, where, a young person might not think that they can do something if they don't see somebody that represents them in the field. Weather does have the advantage of being sort of a, it affects everybody. You see a meteorologist on TV, or a lot of people know a TV meteorologist. When I did a study about our study with middle school kids, we asked them if they could name a scientist, and the most commonly named scientist they saw that they named was a TV meteorologist. So, I mean, having a woman that a young girl can point to, having a person of color on air that someone can see that looks like them, it's really important in helping them to identify that they could be like that person.
And James referred to this, but did you experience this at all? I mean, obviously you've reached that level, but Confucius basically said that something to the effect of real knowledge is to know the extent of your own ignorance. Has studying this effect Kathy, for you, been enlightening to you in any way, or impacted your self-perception about your knowledge?
I don't know if it was necessarily doing this study, but my husband pointed out to me one time that I will answer any question as if I know the answer. And I think it's because I'm an academic, like we think we know everything, right? So,
You're supposed to know.
I've kind of like, when somebody asks me a question now, I'm like, okay, do I really know the answer, or do I just want to appear smart? So I think it's something that we all have a little bit of Dunning-Kruger in some area of our life.
It might be hard being you're used to being relied upon to have answers. It's a tough thing to not. It's been really humbling for me going through this event. I try to take mental notes for myself of what it's like to respond to a risky situation when you are low information, and you're learning sort of as you go, because that'll give us the wisdom we need to try to help people who are going through that kind of situation on the other side. And the thing that I didn't know, I mean, I thought that I knew how the power grids worked. I tangentially was aware of a lot of things about it, but I, at heart, did not have any comprehension for what this was going to be like, and all the different players that were going to be involved. And it was really important because the public safety information that was coming down changed as the event unfolded. So, we had early on, there were some like plumbers. There were like local celebrity people in social media who were like, "Hey, I'm a plumber. This is my area. I know how to help you keep your pipes from bursting. What you need to do is to run some stuff like your dryer and make sure your vents stay clear as the snow is falling, so this really fine powdery stuff doesn't get in there," and blah blah blah. They had basically, the bottom line was run some of your stuff so that you can keep it from getting blocked up as the event proceeds. And then within a day, within 12 hours, we were being told that power was going to be shut off, and no, you are not to run your big devices like your dryers, because that's actually what's causing the system to collapse as a whole. And you not only will you be worried about your pipes bursting or leaks happening in your house, you'll be worried about dying in the cold. And I was just like, oh my gosh, these are opposing recommendations from different kinds of credible sources, and even the plumber wasn't thinking about the electrical problem, so I think it was a really nice example of, you can have expertise and or know a little bit of something about an area, and it still isn't enough to answer all the questions that come up for the bigger problem. And so in that situation, we all were humbled. The meteorologists were humbled, the plumbers were humbled, the electricians were probably the ones who were left holding the last laugh on that one, saying, okay guys, you really needed to listen to us more. But it is a really important thing for us to accept when we need to ask more questions, that we don't have enough information. And it was tough to try to sift through things and then be trying to post. As I was learning, I'd try to post stuff, and then you'd have the people who'd make sort of backhanded snide comments like, how did you not know that? Like, well, who does? No, but you work in an area where you interface with this all the time. No, nobody else knows this. Like, my husband turned to me yesterday and was like, man, I'm learning a lot about the power grid. And I was like, me too. And within 5 minutes of that comment, I saw somebody on social media being snide about, oh, how people don't know about. No, this is not common knowledge. You cannot expect this to be common knowledge. Like, work with us, and don't, as people are trying to learn, don't talk down to them. That's the worst thing you can do if you do have the knowledge. So the other side of the Dunning-Kruger curve, there's the people who don't have a lot of knowledge and they think that they're very knowledgeable. And then as you do attain some knowledge, you start to feel a whole lot more confident. And then as you get a whole lot of knowledge, then you start to go down again and feel less confident. It's those people who are in the middle, who have, some specific knowledge and they feel really, really confident about it, who sometimes can be the most detrimental to this entire process, because they're the ones who shut down questions. And we need people to ask questions. I think that is the most valuable thing that I ever did for myself, was get out of the PhD, coming out where you're taught that you're supposed to be this credible person and know all the answers. And I went and worked in an area that I had no expertise in at all, working in politics in the Senate. And I had to just ask, I had to be very humble and just say, I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. Like, down to questions about formatting memos. It was a really, really important thing because they have very little time to be looking for information that they need. Everything has to be done just so. And man, there's nothing harder for a PhD to do than to walk up to the desk of some 21-year-old and say, I need help formatting a memo. But that is sometimes what you've got to do. You've got to take off your I know everything pants and ask the question, especially when things are really on the line. So I think when it comes to Dunning-Kruger and expertise, we can all be our worst enemy. I really appreciate that point, Kathy, very, very much.
So, Kathy, anything you want to add on the decay effect before I ask you another question that's unrelated to that?
Go ahead.
Your research at Florida State, your PhD research related to the relationship between that individuals develop with their local broadcast meteorologist, this sort of one-sided relationship, and the influence that it has on their response to warning communication. We see that all the time with our TV meteorologists. Talk about that for a second. I think that would be fascinating.
Yeah, so I mean, people built this relationship. In the past, when I did my my dissertation like a million years ago, there wasn't a way to actually interact with them unless you saw them at a parade or like wrote a letter and they wrote you back or something. There's probably a little bit more interaction now, but the idea is like if you see somebody on TV or in the movies, you kind of get to know them, you trust them, you feel like they're your friend. So I mean, that's basically what happens when people watch someone like the TV meteorologist, on a daily basis, and it's more effective with like people such as the meteorologist, the newscasters potentially, because they do have that regular, like I see that person every single night. So it's it really is like a relationship. I will add though, I've done some follow-up studies and with people getting their weather less from TV news, there is this question of, are people building the same relationship? So I think I'd like to do more studies, but in a paper that we published about Hurricane Irma, we found that it really didn't matter how strong a relationship they had with whether they evacuated. Now, hurricanes are different from tornadoes, and there's a lot of different contextual things. So I think it does require more study. I'd like to study it some more. But yeah, I answered more than the question you asked. So
that's good. Talk about your research into tornado warnings and folks with vision or hearing loss too, because that's very important.
Yeah, we did interviews with people. My group did the interviews with people who were blind. Legally blind, so some of them did have some usable vision, and we asked them things like, how they get their warnings, which was fairly similar to the sighted public. A lot of them get them from their smartphone, and then they might follow up with a different source. And then we asked them, what are the barriers that you think you face to acting on the warning, or how can we make things better for you? And the most like consistent thing that people mentioned was more geographic detail, more specific details about like the trajectory of the storm. I want to hear place names. I want to hear things that I recognize, those sorts of things. So geographic detail and just details in general for people that can't see. They still watch the weather they still like listen to, or if they have some usable vision, watch the weather on TV, but they can't necessarily see all the details that people with 20/20 vision can see. So they need a little bit more information delivered to them orally that orally, hearing that they can that they can process. And I'll mention, since we have James Spann on the line here, people in his market were more satisfied with the amount of geographic detail that people were providing than people that were in other people's markets. So he's doing a really good job. If he could write a manual for how to do this, maybe that would help.
I think part of that's just being old. I mean, I've been here for so long, it's easy for me. The hardest part is you're new in a market. You're kind of like, when I moved to Dallas, this was, an eternity ago. I've never been to Dallas before. And goodness gracious, I had all these counties in the DMA. I had the Metroplex. We had parts of Southern Oklahoma. And I just started driving. I just drove. I drove and drove and drove. And I tried to get all this stuff locked in my mind. But half of that battle is just time. The longer the time you spend in a market, the more you learn about the territory. And you can learn the landmarks that they understand. And while I do think barbecue joints are universal, it might not work that well in Washington State as it works down here, but still, it is important because listen, nobody knows what 14 miles southwest of Clanton, Alabama means. Even people that live there, they've lived there all their lives. They don't know what that means. But if you could call out Jim's Pit Barbecue, they know exactly where that is. So, yeah, and I know that's a restriction. The Weather Service, they can't do that, and I'm not faulting them for calling out 14 miles southwest of towns, but it's just the freedom that I have, and I'm very thankful to have it.
Well, James, you're talking about moving to Texas. I moved there, lived there for 3 years, and there's too many square counties down there around the Metroplex.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I remember I had to develop a little trick to figure out where Tarrant County was. Look for Little Square Rockwall County, which is next to Dallas, and then go on over from that. I mean, it's a challenge. I mean, you move to a new place, and I never did learn all the counties and cities around there.
Yeah, sometimes those squigglies and slanted lines are your best friends, Rick, when you're trying to look at a county map and see what you're seeing, especially when it's rather unfamiliar. So Kathy, talk about your research efforts right now between the Mississippi State University and the University of Alabama, since y'all are neighbors there.
Yeah, and the research that we're working on now kind of builds off of some of the things that we were studying with people who were blind. And I should mention that the people at the University of Alabama, they did similar research with people who were deaf or hard of hearing. So Jason Sankbell, shout out to him. He led that effort. But like building on the geographic information piece where people wanted more detail, and also the difference between rural and urban areas. We're talking about like drawing the line for the polygon. If you're drawing that line to show the tornado path and there's nothing that path is crossing, what do you say? So we're looking at differences between, rural areas, how detailed do people want it? How far away, like are their geographic perceptions of distance different from people that live in a place where they have a lot more landmarks that they can, call to mind, or that meteorologists can talk about. So we just finished a survey. We don't have our results fully written up yet. Early indications are that distance isn't really just an urban rural thing, but we're going to have to dig deeper into it to look at things like, how far do they normally travel to the grocery store? Or how far do they normally travel to work? So we're looking at some of those kind of issues to try to get at like how people's real, geospatial area might affect how they're listening to warnings and that kind of thing.
So Kathy, I didn't know that you had a book, and I can't find a copy of it online. So maybe you can point me to where I can buy it. But you've got a book that you wrote in 2012 called Mississippi Weather and Climate with Dr. Charles Wax. And James, cue the breaking news jingle, because we're going to need it in a minute, and Mike Brown. So how do I get hold of that book?
It's the University of Mississippi Press. It was available on Amazon.
It's all sold out. It must be really popular. So James, we've got some breaking news, because I wanted to ask you, because you've worked around Dr. Wax and Charles Brown. These are
We interrupt this program for a CBS Radio Net Alert Bulletin.
Go.
These are famous people. Dr. Wax, of course, retired, in 2011? Is that right?
Little later than that.
A little
because
later than
he was
that?
Still there when we wrote the book, but I'm not sure exactly what year.
But now our friend Bruce Thomas has endowed a scholarship. Dr. Charles Wax endowed climatology faculty fellowship that's going to benefit meteorology and climatology faculty within the Department of Geosciences at your university. So I thought that was really, really exciting. He, of course, and all the former students there look up to and love Dr. Wax a lot. So, I'm sure it was quite fun to work around him while he was still in the department.
Yeah, everybody loves Dr. Wax. And we're just really thrilled that Bruce recognized him and our department in that way. We're really thankful.
Well, I know you're the president-elect of the NWA, and Nate couldn't be here tonight. He said it was because of children dues, but I know it's because we can never have you two in the same place at the same time. That just wouldn't work with the Secret Service rules and things. But anyway, are you looking forward to your presidency next year, or are you a little nervous about it? It's a big deal.
Yeah, a little bit of both, I think. No, Nate and I have been kind of throwing around some ideas, things that if we get to focus on some things that maybe we'll look into. And I'm hoping that the National Weather Association can roll out some really fun new things in the next couple of years.
Well, that's very exciting, James. I know we've stretched this show out a lot longer than we normally would because we've had sort of a come as you can attitude tonight, and we don't have at least we're a lot further away from our heart out. So why don't you take it and we can run the recorded segments and come back and talk to Bruce for a minute.
Yeah, let's do that. So we're going to pause real quick, and we're going to come back with Bruce. We'll have the picks of the week, the weather roundup, and a whole lot more. WeatherBrains has much more to go. We're going to get a break for Tony Rice and Jen, and we will be right back.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your Astronomy Outlook.
NASA's preparing to land another 1-ton car-sized rover on Mars. Perseverance will touch down shortly after 4 p.m. local solar time at Jezero Crater, about 18 degrees north of the equator, and about halfway between its big sister Curiosity and the Opportunity rover, whose mission ended about 2 years ago this week. The process begins as the cruise stage, which provided fuel and power, separates about 980 miles above the surface. This begins the task of slowing the spacecraft from about 12,000 miles per hour down to zero during the entry, descent, and landing, or EDL, and it's all done autonomously. Next comes a very low-tech but very important step. A pair of 154-pound balance masses are ejected. This changes the center of gravity and points the heat shield into that thin Martian atmosphere. Percy, as we've come to call her, still in her back shell, hits the top of the atmosphere about 81 miles above the surface. Like Earth, Mars' upper atmosphere is pretty lumpy, and that can kick the spacecraft to and fro. This makes it necessary to use a couple of small thrusters to keep that heat shield pointing in the right direction. Next comes the straighten up and fly right stage, or SUFER. Still traveling at more than 1,000 miles per hour and nearly 9 miles up, more of those strategically placed dead weights are ejected, and this again changes the center of gravity, setting that angle of attack back to zero. All along, Percy's looking through her heat shield at the surface rushing up beneath her. The Mars Entry, Descent, and Landing Instrumentation 2, or MEDLEY 2, will collect the first ever direct measurements of the loads that are placed on the spacecraft as it enters the Martian atmosphere. Throughout the descent, a total of 28 thermocouplers, heat flux sensors, and pressure transducers will record temperatures and pressures. About 6 miles above the surface, the heat shield is separated. Speeds down to about 360 miles an hour, and almost all that lateral movement is gone as well. A suite of instruments turns on with less than 3 miles in altitude, imaging the ground beneath for comparison with maps that have been attained by other orbiting missions, and begins calculating an optimal landing area. About a minute before touchdown, Perseverance sheds that back shell, fires its descent rockets, and begins free flight about 1.1 miles above the surface. During this time, descent velocity is reduced from 180 miles an hour down to 3 miles an hour. At just under 66 feet in altitude, the rover extends its wheels and begins lowering itself on 20-foot cables. Once those cables go slack, the rover knows it's touched down and severs those cables with pyrotechnic charges. NASA will be looking for those signals of successful touchdown at 3:55 p.m. Eastern. EDL will be long over, though, since those signals take a little more than 11 minutes to travel the 1.3 million miles to Earth. Coverage begins on NASA TV at 1:15 p.m. Central, 2:15 p.m. Eastern. Visit mars.nasa.gov for more information. That's your Astronomy Outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
This week in tornado history, 3 tornadoes were confirmed on February 16th, 1995, all in Alabama. The strongest was a devastating F3 that tracked 14 miles through parts of Coleman and Marshall counties. This tornado began about 3 miles west of Joppa just before 5 a.m. Central Time. It traveled to the east-northeast through the town, across Alabama Highway 69 and into Marshall County, just southwest of Arab. The tornado moved across the south side of that town. 77 dwellings and 6 businesses were destroyed in Coleman County. The Joppa Elementary School was destroyed. 80 dwellings and 6 businesses were demolished in Marshall County. There were 130 injuries reported in this event and 6 fatalities. 1 death occurred in a home and the rest in mobile homes. 4 of the deaths were in the Arab area and 1 in Joppa. A pregnant woman was severely injured in her mobile home and was sent into labor early, and sadly the baby died at birth. In the rubble of a damaged trailer park, a baby was found unharmed. Fireman Robert Reynolds was quoted in the newspaper as saying, "We found a 1-year-old baby under 2 trailers. He was sitting there, not making a sound." Learn more about this tornado event on our website, tornadotalk.com. Do you want to learn to analyze and forecast? Join Tim Vasquez at Forecast Lab, airing most weekdays on YouTube, covering current weather, forecast techniques, and random topics. The address, youtube.com/forecastlab.
And interestingly enough, James, that tornado right there that I didn't know Jen was going to talk about tonight is probably the reason we have a Huntsville National Weather Service office again. Would you agree or disagree with that statement?
Yeah, that's a whole show topic right there. But I think that started the process. They shut that thing down, I think, later in the year, and then they brought it back. And yeah, it's a very interesting story. But I do believe that has something to do with there being a National Weather Service office in Huntsville now.
Yeah, here's what my notes say. It was just before dawn on a Thursday morning. Thunderstorms were sweeping across north and central Alabama. The National Weather Service office in Birmingham was in clear at that time. But the Weather Service office in Huntsville had responsibility for the Tennessee Valley at that time, like you said. But at 4:25, a lightning strike knocked out both operations in the Huntsville office, including its radar, and Birmingham assumed responsibility. The juggling of duties would probably lead to the tragic problem. There was a severe thunderstorm warning in effect for Coleman County at 4:55, and Birmingham saw signs of the developing tornado, but it was nearly into Marshall County, so they decided not to issue the tornado warning for Coleman County. When the warning was issued for Madison County at 5:01, the tornado had already been on the ground for 2 minutes, and the town of Joppa was in the path of it, and of course there was a lot of destruction there. And then Arab was hit at 5:06, and sirens weren't sounded, early enough to make things happen there, because they were waiting for the warning to come from NOAA Weather Radio. But that was just a bad situation, and a lot of still a lot of folks in that region still have a lot of apprehension about that because of that. So interestingly, and good timing for Bruce Jones. Bruce got to issue a warning for it to get on that weather radio, but obviously, we had the flip side of that 3 or 4 weeks ago here in Birmingham, with an excellent warning by the National Weather Service in Birmingham. Hit the weather radio immediately. Didn't have any WEA support. The TV stations were doing a great job, but the weather radio was first and foremost there that night, and alerted a lot of people to that tornado. And a lot of people took action on it. We're really appreciative to have you in Midland as a sponsor here of WeatherBrains, and we love having you every week to talk about this, because you don't approach it just from a Midland standpoint. You approach it as an ambassador of weather radio. So, what nuggets can you drop on us today in this week of a terrible winter storm that has impacted much of the United States?
Well, yeah, thanks very much, Bill. I tell you, I've been an advocate of weather radio since I started in broadcasting back in the 70s, just because I thought it was a no-brainer system. You get this little gizmo and it's just like a smoke detector. You know, I was living in Columbia, Missouri when the Columbia Fire Department came around door to door holding a new gizmo they had called a smoke detector and telling everybody, yeah, go down here to Ace Hardware and you can buy them for $10 off or whatever. They had a coupon for you. So, you know, smoke detectors at one time were a novel device. They've proven how valuable they are. They are required by law. NOAA weather radios are just as valuable, but there's no law requiring you to get one. It's just kind of up to your common sense and your sense of wanting to protect your family and do everything you can to make sure that they're safe. So it's a little bit disappointing sometimes to find out that some people don't have a weather radio. A lot of people don't have a weather radio in their home. But hey, I just keep talking about the importance of having them. And in this winter storm, I noticed that in West Virginia, one of the county emergency managers issued a civil emergency message that went out on NOAA Weather Radio. It was from Charleston, West Virginia National Weather Service office, and it says Metro 911 has received reports of hazardous driving conditions across the county due to black ice. So motorists are advised to stay in and stay off the roads. So NOAA Weather Radio is not only a good warning device for weather emergencies, but it can be used for non-weather emergencies like a civil emergency message issued by your county emergency manager or your local police department. So in this one, it was a non-weather emergency that was instigated by weather, but you can have all sorts of problems with a nuclear power plant or a chemical spill out on the highway, a train derailment, and NOAA Weather Radio can also be very useful in situations like that. So they are much like a smoke detector, and really they should be in every home, but it's up to the individual to do that. And it's up to we in the weather community to spread that message and encourage people to get and use this radio frequency alerting system because it still works very, very well.
It's really critical to have it programmed properly and have it turned on. And there are lots of ways to learn how to program it, both local programming events in your area, also tremendous videos all over the internet about how to do the easy, same programming. You know, you gotta leave it turned on though. And I was thankful I had mine on that night because it was my birthday and we were celebrating at that point after the show. I wasn't working weather. And so, you know, that was an example for me right there. The weather radio was our first line of notification that night. So, you know, there's that decay effect, Kathy, you know, no matter, you know, how much you think, you know, it can sneak up on you. So Bruce, you know, you mentioned those firemen coming around, when you were younger with $10 coupons. You got a coupon for us too, don't you?
Absolutely. Yeah. Great segue there, Bill. Thanks very much. If you'll go to Midland Radio or midlandusa.com, midlandusa.com, and use the promo code SPANN25. That's SPANN 25. You get 25% off your purchase of a weather radio from midlandusa.com. So it's just something that we're trying to do to make it a little bit easier for you to get one for yourself or maybe for a family member. That white radio down at the bottom, you know, when I got my meteorology degree, it's like everybody in my family wanted me to call them during severe weather, and they lived all over the country. And I'm like, I just bought them all a weather radio. I said, listen to this because it'll be far more accurate than any forecast I can give you because I can't cover severe weather all across the country all at the same time. So if you have family members who are always bugging you about severe weather, a great gift to get them is a NOAA weather radio. And then they get all the information direct from the National Weather Service, and there's no faster way to get their watches and warnings. So SPAN25 is the promo code to be used at midlandusa.com.
And I imagine that ER210 has gotten a lot of play this week too, Bruce.
Yeah, I saw on social media a couple of folks posted some pictures of, you know, one of these emergency crank radios where they can still tune to AM and FM, and NOAA weather radio still has a flashlight on it, and they can use it to recharge their smartphone.
Well, we're glad you're with us. Sorry for all the shifting times and crazy stuff we've done over the last couple of weeks, but maybe we'll be a little more consistent, if that's a word I can use, Kim, in the incoming weeks. James?
Always a joy to be here. Thank you, guys.
All right. Thanks, Bruce. So weather roundup real quick. Obviously, it's cold and it's unsettled. Rick and Kim, you guys are going back on snow or ice. What you got up there? It's got to be snow, right?
This is a rare occasion where it's just snow. We don't have to worry about precip type. It almost never happens here, but and I keep looking out the window on radar. There's a pretty good band setting up right over Norman. So Kim, you'll have to run and look outside when we get done here. But I think we're getting some pretty good snow. I'm anxious to go measure, but yeah, it's a rare occasion for us to not have to worry so much about precip type, and we're going to love every second of it.
I thought I saw a pack of coyotes out there on your lawn, Rick. So you might want to check.
Don't joke about that, because I just moved here in August, and somebody in our little neighborhood Facebook group yesterday said they saw a full-grown coyote walking down our street here. So,
we have coyotes all the time in my corner of town. We
Really?
listen a lot of nights. You can, especially in the summer, you can just hear them. They're only in the next couple miles over, and sometimes they do rove through the neighborhood too. That was a nice. I moved from DC to Coyoteville, so that was a good move. But welcome to Oklahoma.
Show title. You know what the coyotes do? He's trying to chase the roadrunner. That's what the guy's doing. If he needs to change vendors, he buys those rockets from Acme, and those things never work. I mean, they're just not good rockets.
They were the first ones in the phone book, though, James.
Exactly. There you go. So, Kathy, what's ahead for Starkville? You got freezing rain, sleet, snow. What's coming up for you?
Tomorrow we're going to have cold rain to hopefully clear out all the ice that's still on the roads. And then Thursday, I think we have another chance for some freezing rain and some other sorts of wintry wonderfulness. So hopefully then that'll be it, and we'll have spring.
Yeah, I'm excited about this pattern flip. It looks like the whole thing flips. And next week down here where we are, we'll be in the 60s. And that'll be like a heat wave. I mean, that's exciting stuff. So I'm very excited. But I always have to worry about March and early April. Some of the biggest snows down here in the Deep South have come during March and the first week of April. So I warn people that winter will not be over for a while. But let's see. Let's do picks of the week here real quick, because we need to wrap this. We kept you guys for a long time. So my pick of the week, it's a piece by the Capital Weather Gang about the wild snow maps that you see on social media. Are they good? Are they bad? Do we need to shut off access of computer models to weather hobbyists? Very interesting piece, and I thought that was very timely considering the fact that we are in the dead of winter in the middle of snow map season. All right, so let's go to Rick. Got a pick for us this week? I know you got to have a good one, Rick.
Yeah, we're talking a lot about power outages, and it's not a pleasant topic, but there's a website that's trying to aggregate all those power outage reports from across the area. Now we have 15 different ones that we look at just in our CWA, probably all the different cooperatives. This is poweroutage.us that is gathering all that, and you can get some interesting statistics. It may not grab every single cooperative and get you every single outage, but it certainly gives you a good idea of what's going on. And it's a nasty looking situation right now in Texas.
And that information seems reliable on that site. I don't know who's behind it or what, but it seems very accurate. So it's a great resource. That's a great pick. All right, let's go over to Kim. I know you got a pick of the week for us.
I do. My pick of the week is from the Mesnet ticker, the Oklahoma Mesnet. They have periodic stories that they write about the weather goings on and putting it into climatological context. Really fun fact for the state yesterday, what drove the big power issue, it was the coldest average temperature day on record for the state of Oklahoma. So my pick just details that, and you can see some really cool maps and really interesting historical context as well.
Awesome. And again, all these will be up on the website, weatherbrains.com. Bruce, what's your pick of the week? I know you got a good one.
Yeah, Nebraska State Historical Society has a webpage about the blizzards of 1948-49. It started snowing in Nebraska, Wyoming, and the Dakotas in October, November, and it was still blizzard after blizzard in April. And Chadron, Nebraska, in 2 days picked up 41 inches of snow. And to deliver food, they had to have the Army, the National Guard, the Air Force, all involved. I'll send you guys the webpage for Nebraska State Historical Society. snowbound, the blizzards of 1948, 49.
Wow. All right. Good deal. So, Kathy, we've tried to stall long enough for you to come up with a pick for us this week. So, something good weather related. So, go.
I don't actually have a website. I didn't come prepared, but I'm going to shout out to a journal, Weather, Climate, and Society. If you've enjoyed hearing about some of the topics that Kim and I and Chris have been talking about, you can read about all kinds of good stuff in that. It's on the AMS website, American Meteorological Society. So
how you getting along with Mike Leach, your new football coach?
I don't know him personally. He sounds like a real character. I'm hoping he can bring us some wins, maybe some more wins next year.
I got to meet this guy. So the next time I'm over there, I'm going to go track this guy down and find him. He looks like a fun guy to hang out with. He might not win a lot of games, but he looks like a fun guy, So, all right. So, Bill Murray, what you got for us? Go.
Yeah, James, can you get Feinbaum on the show sometime? He had some interesting discussion today about a Memphis meteorologist that Rick might remember. I think it's Jack Heaton. Is that right? Rick, who was on television, who was also the Memphis State University broadcaster. Do you know anything about him?
He was the sports anchor for a long, long time on Dave Brown's
station. So he didn't do weather. He did sports.
He didn't do weather.
Feinbaum said he did weather, and he talked a long time about him. I thought that was interesting. Looks like, Rick, you're going to go from 40 below average to 30 above average if James is right about this pattern flip. That's I don't think anybody will be complaining about that.
Bring it on. The sooner the better.
Most likely. And James, I don't know. Scott just said that we've got the winter storm watch has just been issued for parts of North Alabama. So we got that to look forward to. And I don't know if you noticed that yet, but next week's show will be a morning show. I spoke too soon when I talked about consistency, but the prize will be that we get to talk to the director of the National Hurricane Center, of course, Ken Graham. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And that will be Monday, the 22nd at 9 a.m. Central Time. So that's going to be a lot of fun. My pick of the week is Tim Vasquez's Forecast Lab. Thanks to Tim also for sponsoring the Weather Roundup. And thanks to Bruce and Midland for sponsoring the show. Thank you very, very much.
Do you want to learn to analyze and forecast? Join Tim Vasquez at Forecast Lab, airing most weekdays on YouTube, covering current weather, forecast techniques, and random topics. The address, youtube.com/forecastlab.
And on that note, we're going to wrap it up. This is a great show. Good to have Rick back on the show. Rick, you're the greatest. You know that. Kathy, thank you for your time tonight. Thanks so much. Appreciate your work over in Starkville. Kim, thanks for joining us. Bruce, Bill, listen, if you want to get in touch with us, the email address is email@weatherbrains.com. The show notes will be on weatherbrains.com, and we'll get Aubrey and the gang back next week, and we'll talk about the trials and tribulations of weather forecasters. It's going to be quite a roller coaster ride. So on behalf of the entire WeatherBrains crew, I'm James Spann. Thanks for listening. Have a marvelous week, and God bless. Well, thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks for being flexible.
Yeah, appreciate it.
It worked out nicely. It all kind of